Welcome to the All In Podcast, the show that explores how the top real estate entrepreneurs have gone all in on their businesses. I'm your host, David Morse, with my co-host, Joe Quattrucci, and I invite you to come along with us as we explore the stories of the most elite professionals in the game today to learn how they went all in and how you and I can do the same. So I just have to ask, are you all in? I'm David. You guys know who I am by this point, I hope. And this is Joe. And today's episode, we're just going to have a conversation, right?
Yeah, let's do it.
What are we going to have a conversation about?
Yeah, well, good question. Good question. And I think the answer to the question, David, is this is the All In Podcast, where we encourage and challenge our listeners to go out there and take immediate, massive action. Massive action. And so that's what I think we should talk about today. You know, we end every episode with asking our guest, you know, what's the one bit of advice? What's the one thing our listeners can go do leaving here today? And I trust and I hope that a lot of our listeners go out there and do take that action. And a few episodes ago, which number was it?
26?
26, 28 maybe?
No, 26.
Well, 26.
Yeah, it was 26.
What was the title of that one?
Crush Your Goals in
Crush Your
2021.
Goals. And we talked about how to plan for the upcoming year, how to strategically write goals with different priorities and strategies. And that's all good so long as the listener actually takes it and implements it.
Yeah.
In whatever way it makes sense for them, right?
Yeah. And here's the deal, and we know this, even though we end every single episode with that question to our guests, the likelihood that any of us go and take action on it, like let's just get raw and real, the fact is probably most of us turn the podcast off and we keep driving in our car and then we forget about it. Right. And that's just the nature of life and self-mastery and personal development. Sometimes we don't take that massive action. And so really today, I think we want to focus in on the question of what's holding you back. Like when you ingest an interview or a book or you watch something on YouTube or IGTV, you know, wherever you're consuming your content, and you think to yourself, there's that little voice in your head that says, I've got to implement this right now. And you don't, why is that?
Right.
And I think we just need to have a conversation around that because it's real in every single one of our lives.
It really is. And even, you know, Tony Robbins is somebody who I listen to a lot, and he even says after his events, which are oftentimes 2 and 3 days long, 5 or 6 days long, where you're fully submerged in the environment, you're as energized as you're ever going to be, you're passionate about your goals. He even talks about how people leave his event after 5 or 6 days and then still don't go implement.
Definitely.
Because they get distracted and they get, pulled off course, or other people's priorities take place, or life happens. So it's not necessarily a lack of intention so much as a lack of follow through.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's the nature of, quite honestly, I think it's the nature of how people actually change. Like change in a person's life, whether it's business habits, whether it's personal habits, fitness habits, anything like that, those things don't change overnight, in my opinion. Now, you might have a different opinion, but like it's not just to me, it's not just a light switch that happens in your head. It's incremental decisions that shape future habits, right? I think of F.M. Alexander, and I mention this quote a lot. You know, people don't decide their futures; they decide their habits, and their habits decide their future. Well, I'd step it back even further. Like you don't decide your habits; you decide specific choices that inform habits, and then those habits decide your future. And so, to your point, yeah, it's not necessarily a lack of intention; it's just making individual decisions. Mm. So, why else? So, like, if we had to categorize this, like, you know, you and I like to think through things rationally. So maybe let's take things like one at a time.
Sure.
Like, what are the top reasons? All right. If this was a YouTube video, Joe, like top 3 reasons why people don't take action and what's holding you back.
Right.
Well, what would you say is number 1?
In my opinion, I would say maybe the first thing, going back to what you were just saying, is that people haven't made an actual decision to do something. They hear a podcast, they read a book, and they're like, that would be a good idea. That could definitely help me. I think I'd like to do that. And in fact, I even intend to do that. today, tomorrow, sometime in the future, but they haven't truly committed. They haven't made the promise to themselves or to anybody else, like, I will do this thing. And so it's kind of like a back of the mind intention without necessarily having the same level of a commitment attached to it.
I like that you just mentioned that, like, they haven't brought someone else into the picture, right? Like, I become way more focused, whether it's you or whether it's someone that I report to or someone else I trust or my kids or my wife when I bring someone else into the picture. So I think that right there is, like, a helpful nugget. Like, what would change in your life if, or my life, if every time I decided to do something, I picked up the phone and I made a phone call and I said, Joe, I'm doing this. And your question back to me was, how much by when?
How much by when? Oh, what? Yeah.
Right?
How can we quantify this? How can we measure and track this? How can I follow up with you to make sure that you're actually doing what you intend to do?
Yeah, and I don't think most people have that in their life. Like, think about the exercise that we bring some people through when we're, like, consulting and coaching them, where they list out their job, their business, their spiritual, their physical, their fitness, and we kind of create this circle, and then we ask them to put a key person in each of the slots next to those. I mean, typically the way this exercise goes is, if we're lucky, we'll put one or two people into those slots of who is helping us with our finances, who is helping us with our fitness, who is helping us with our faith, whatever those categories are. Most of us get around that circle and we actually don't have anyone to put in there. Or if we do, it's someone who really doesn't give a rip about whether or not we succeed in it at all.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's what we need to do better at.
Let me give a small case in point to exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
This is a true story, so it's top of mind. Yesterday, I was in the market center, and I want to give a shout-out to our incredible productivity coach, Jackie Viscoso, former CrossFit instructor, owner of a gym. She's now our productivity coach, doing a great job with our agents. And she said, hey, Joe, just out of curiosity, have you worked out the past 2 days? And I laughed and I was like, well, actually, no, but how did you even know that? And she's like, well, I noticed that you were coming into work at a different time than normal, and from when I know that you're working out. And I was like, I can't believe that you remembered that I told you that. When I work out, I get into the office, half hour later. And she picked up on it. And then she said, well, what's your plan for the rest of the week? And I said, well, you can bet your butt I'm going to the next 3 days.
Yeah.
And so sure enough, this morning, 5 o'clock, my alarm went off and I was getting my butt over to the gym.
That's why you look pumped today.
I mean, I didn't want to say anything. But that's what you're talking about. I didn't even ask her to hold me accountable. I didn't even point out to her my plan. She's just somebody that's proven herself that she cares about my goals and cares about, what I'm working on as much as I do. So what an incredible accountability partner that she is, being organically. And imagine what that could look like if two people have an intentional conversation around that.
Yeah. Okay, so that's super good. So, okay, one thing to go take action on right now. Actually, pause the episode, pick up the phone. Who's that person got to be? Okay, so
right.
Decision making, so not being able to actually make that decision. That's one thing that we're talking about. Not necessarily putting someone who cares about the goal as much as you do in place. I think another one that comes to mind is just distraction.
Yeah, totally.
Right. We get a lot of people who get into real estate, and when the question comes, like, are you going all in on this? Like, are you burning the boats? Are you just pushing offshore and, making it happen? The answer is no. And while that's okay to some extent, like, if you tell me you want to, like, succeed in real estate and you're not going to make the plunge all in, you're going to get distracted. And it doesn't have to be just real estate. I think just distractions. Life happens. We have a lot of different categories. Joe, like, I have a wife and kids and, multiple things going on in the brokerage world and, all these different things. It's easy to get distracted. I mean, some of our guests come on and you're like, how the heck do they actually get anything done? They're like going in 27 different directions.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts around distraction and how distraction holds people back?
It's a super important thing to talk about because I'm somebody that quite literally consults people on their calendar and time blocking and time management and execution and follow through. And still to this day, I'll acknowledge transparently that I get distracted throughout my day and I let other people pull me out of priority. And so I guess the first thing is, if you're finding yourself, susceptible to distraction, don't be too hard on yourself. We all are, and let's be cognizant of it, and let's make some changes. The most fundamental concept is using a calendar at a high level, but not just using your calendar day to day. What are you doing over the weekend? For me, it's Sunday night, looking ahead at my next 5 days and saying, is the most important thing for me to accomplish this week blocked on my calendar? And what on my calendar is actually not that important, that's just going to waste time? What can I cancel or remove or postpone or push back because it's just not quite important enough this week? Then day to day, it's of course the question of, can you stay true to it?
Yeah.
Or when, Johnny pops by around lunchtime and wants to take you off site for a 3-hour lunch, and like, well, geez, a beer sounds good right now. Are you going to let that distraction pull you? Or are you going to say, no, I brought, my ham sandwich and a bag of chips, and I'm going to sit here and work through lunch because I've got a lot to take care of today?
I'm friggin' Johnny, aren't I?
Yeah, sometimes.
Shoot.
And sometimes I'm Johnny. Which is another good point. Sometimes we are the distractor, not realizing it with other people.
Definitely. Wow.
What do you think about that?
Light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, and I see that. I mean, that has shown up with us. Mm-hmm. And going off site to have a lunch, we sometimes, and I will say this caveat, we sometimes need distraction that actually enhances the time that we work. So, okay, there's our caveat aside, but that's not the rule. That's the exception.
That's the once in a while, right?
The rule is, if you know that you're trying to accomplish something and you're allowing yourself to get distracted with other things, or you're being that distractor to someone else, right? Like, I have people that report directly to me. I know what they need to get accomplished. Like, I have weekly meetings with every single one of my team members, and they tell me this is what I'm going to accomplish. And so if I am the one that's pulling them out of their 20%, then what right do I have to then hold them accountable at the end of the week, right? So this happened a few weeks ago, actually, since we're being we're being open. A few weeks ago, I've thrown a lot onto. People know our audio engineer, Casey. I throw a lot onto his plate, right? And I expect him to get a lot of things done, and I pull him in a bunch of different directions. Well, he came into my office for our weekly one-on-one where I hold him accountable to all of this stuff, and I say, did you do this? No? Why? And we go through these things, and he knows what these meetings are like. But he pointed out that for like 4 or 5 weeks straight, I was like 10 minutes late or 15 minutes late to our appointment. And I was justifying it because I was in meetings with other team members doing things. But what was I doing, Joe? I was pulling him out of his 20% and literally wasting his time. Right. I was being that distractor from him being able to get things done. And when you do that as a manager, as a leader, beyond it just showing disrespect to your people, which is the most important thing, that I needed to swallow that pill, it also distracts them from actually accomplishing the goal that they need to get done, so that ultimately I and we together can accomplish the big goal.
Right. Yeah, that's an incredible realization.
Yeah. So I mean, and
good for him for bringing it up and saying,
exactly.
"Hey, boss."
that's not an easy conversation to have.
Sure.
And I think that is something that happens a lot, probably, as far as just being the distractor.
Sure.
And then wanting to pass the buck off when the goal isn't accomplished.
It's totally unintentional, but it's one of those things. Just the awareness around it now empowers you to make a decision and make change.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so
one more thing I want to say on distractions before we move on, because the whole idea of putting things on a calendar isn't so that you have a really pretty calendar and you can show off how busy you look. That's not the intention, right? The intention is, and I'm still working on this, by the way, when it comes to 9 o'clock and from 9 to 10 I have a certain activity blocked, I need to be able to put my brain 100% focus on that particular activity. And Gary Keller talks about this idea of multitasking and how nobody can multitask to the same level and complete the same amount of work that you could if you just focus on one thing at a time in sequential order. And so when I'm talking about time blocking with people on their calendar and managing their calendar, when you're in that 1 hour block or 2 hour block or 10-minute block, whatever it is on your calendar, you've got to do whatever you can to stay 100% focused on that particular activity, knowing that if there's another priority, it has another place on your calendar. And not letting yourself in the back of your mind wander, and not taking 15, 20 minutes to hone in on the particular activity that you're focused on. You know what I mean? Because that's a third of your hour block right there, just trying to get into the zone.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a really good point. And I think one thing that can help with that is we say work expands to fill the time allowed too. And so analyzing those time blocks that you are putting on your calendar and shrinking them, right? I think most of us could probably shrink our time blocks, because what could happen if we were that much more focused for 30 minutes instead of 1 hour?
It's 100% true.
When I need, and this isn't anything new. Time experts talk about this all the time. The whole vacation, the vacation mode, right? Like, what happens when you and I have a vacation that's happening tomorrow? We still have a mile-long list.
But things get done a whole lot quicker.
Things get done.
Right.
Things get done.
Right.
So, let's say you're in a meeting with someone who reports to you, Joe. Like, my question, if you're working through time blocking with them and they say, well, I need an hour to do that, my challenge back is, can you get it done in 30? Well, I don't think I can get it done in 30. Well, how about we try?
Right.
Because I bet you can.
Yeah.
And I also think that if you do that, you're giving yourself back more time. And so it takes some of that anxiety off. Like, oh, man, if I have a 3-hour time block on something, that's a lot of time. And the reality is you're probably not going to stay intentionally focused for 3 hours, right? We're distracted beings. So I mean, getting intentional around those time blocks, super, super important. And it's not just to be pretty. And
one of the things, David, I love about doing this podcast with you is it gives me an opportunity to kind of just share what I'm learning as I'm learning it.
Yeah.
We're still very much in what I can be considering a developmental phase of learning and growing as young leaders, and still figuring a lot of things out. And that's my segue into this concept behind not taking taking work home with me. And what I was doing for months and months when I first moved to Arizona, because of course, I'm single, I don't have kids, so my time is pretty much my time, and I have that flexibility. And so what I was doing was saying, occasionally I would procrastinate or put off a project until the nighttime because I knew I had nothing blocking my schedule this evening. And so I'd end up going home and working longer. And what I found was that I actually was getting less done even though I had more time. So I had to make the mental shift. I'm going to stop working at 5 p.m. and anything that I need to get done needs to get done prior to 5 p.m. And I've seen my own productivity skyrocket.
That's awesome.
Because I don't give myself 8 to 10 p.m. anymore.
That's a great example.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I haven't read this book yet, but I've been hearing so many good things about it. That 12-hour year, 12-week year.
12-week year.
12-week year, and it's sitting on my shelf to read. But I think that's really they talk about how you can boil an entire year into 12 weeks of time, and that's kind of the same thing, but on a daily level.
Sure.
Okay. So you said one more thing on distractions, and then
we talked for 10 minutes,
and that's fine. And then I thought of one more thing,
and then I thought of one more thing.
Because the question is, what's holding you back from taking action? What if I kind of want to just flip the question for a second here? Not flip it, but what's holding you back from reaching your goal? I thought about distractions. And just recently, distractions almost cost me to lose something that was important. So you know that one of the key ways that I grow the brokerage is by attracting talent to the team.
Sure.
And through the grapevine, I was very close to let's say closing this deal, right? Really close. And apparently I got distracted. I heard that maybe I was looking at my watch, looking at the time.
You heard.
I heard this. It was through the grapevine.
Oh.
It was through the grapevine. And I'm really glad it made its way through the grapevine, because I had to really stop. And I went to every single one of my team members and I said, do I look at my watch a lot? Do I look at my clock? And it was very interesting. Some of them said, no, never. But a couple said, yeah, you do it a lot.
Interesting.
And so it was just interesting. I thought about it because of distractions. Distractions could be holding you back from taking action. Distractions could also be holding you back from closing the deal, from sealing the deal.
Right.
And again, I think it comes back to time and time management and mastering your calendar and mastering your block of time. Because let's just say I was, right? Let's just say I was distracted. You know why? It's because I had to get back here to do another interview.
Sure.
And so the way I positioned my calendar almost cost me something that was very dear. It was people that I had the opportunity to get into business with. And what a travesty that would have been. Now, thankfully, next meeting, I took my watch off. I left it. I left it home, and I said, I can't let this.
I'm not even
like,
wear
this
one
can't
anymore.
happen. I can't. I don't even have my watch on right now. Like, and I love my watch.
Way to make a smart, practical adjustment, though.
Yeah.
I mean, it's obviously an extreme case, and maybe not everybody has to go quite that far, but that's a prime example of how you take the awareness into, now what do I need to do to change it?
Action.
I stop wearing my watch.
Action.
And as silly as that may seem, you're not going to be distracted by your watch today.
Right. I'm not going to. You're right.
I love it.
All right. So what's holding people back? Distraction, lack of decision making. Let's get into probably the big one, right?
The big one.
And we don't need to belabor it, but we definitely need to talk about it. Fear.
It's fear.
Fear holds people back from learning how to ride a bike, learning how to swim, going out and starting their own business, knocking on that door to land a client, going on the listing appointment because they don't know how to fill out the contract. Fear holds people back in every industry, every vein, every business or life endeavor. Fear. So
I
we've
like
got
to think of it
talk
in kind of three categories. The three most common types of fear I see or hear about are fear of failure, fear of rejection, and fear of uncertainty. I just don't know what's going to happen next. And I think that those are all very applicable in the real estate world. Rejection is something that a lot of people aren't used to when they get into any type of sales role. And when I say rejection, that's obviously a strong word. And I try not to even use the word rejection, honestly. What's that?
Well, I was just gonna say I didn't have much. I didn't have much rejection in my life. I was so winsome.
I can believe that. I can believe that. You didn't.
That was unneeded. We can edit that.
This is hard. This one's a hard one for David to relate
to. I don't understand it.
Well, fear of rejection, knocking on a door, for example, prospecting, over the phone or even in person, people oftentimes fear the idea of what happens if this person says no, what happens if this person gets upset with me, what happens if this person feels like I'm wasting their time, and they don't want to be responsible for that. And so they let their own internal anxiety and they let their brain start running with the idea of what happens if this person rejects me publicly.
Yeah. No, and let's be honest again. That was clearly a joke. I mean, every day I still face that. I mean, calling successful brokers and saying like, "Hey, let's get into business together," like that. The lion's share of them say no,
right?
Like get away. And so rejection is very real. So like what? And I think we've talked about it before, but like on rejection. Like, what do you do when you get a no?
In a nutshell, I always remind people, they're not rejecting you as a person, and you're the only person that can allow them to reject you. And that's why I said rejection's a word that I try not to even use a lot of the times. I use the example, you're walking through the mall, and, the guy outside of Panda Express is giving away free bites of chicken. And you walk past, and he asks you if you want a piece of chicken. And you say, no, thanks, I'm all set. First of all, you're not rejecting the individual standing there, the human being. You're just rejecting what they're offering, which is a piece of chicken. Why are you rejecting that offering? Well, because maybe you just ate lunch, or maybe you don't like chicken. And so my point is, whatever service you're offering, whatever item you're selling, when somebody says no, you have to realize that they're not rejecting you as a human being. It's not a personal decision. They just don't need or want or have a desire for what you're offering at this moment in time. And that's an important caveat because we know that everybody needs a place to live as it pertains to real estate. And so life events happen sometimes unexpectedly that cause them to actually need your services, even if they don't realize it yet.
Definitely. I mean, okay, the real question is why in the world would you ever reject orange chicken?
I mean, that is we should talk about that some more.
But here's the thing. What would happen if that guy never asked the next passerby about chicken, or that passerby
then he would give away zero chicken.
Zero chicken.
Yep.
And then Panda Express goes under.
Right.
And then our lives are devastated.
Yeah, right. Right. And so that's the first thing around the fear of rejection that I tell people. And then the other one, is of course, even if somebody does get nasty with you, even if somebody does get a little belligerent or unnecessarily loud or obnoxious, two things I like to remember. The first one is, that's probably a reflection of what's happening in their life that has nothing to do with me. And I like to use the term, I like to give people grace. If you're that upset with me asking you a question, then there's probably a lot more going on in your life. And you know what? I'm not going to get mad back. I almost have a little bit of empathy for you. Like, geez, I'm sorry, I'm sorry I caught you at a bad time. Clearly, this isn't the best time to talk about real estate. Let me, no problem. Let me circle back with you, in a month or whatever, or maybe never. But the point being that it's probably not a direct result of you asking a simple question, hey, do you have a real estate need? They're probably deflecting something that's happening in a different area of their life.
Yeah, definitely. So there's rejection. Fear. The other thing you mentioned was fear of failure, right?
Yeah.
Like fear of failure. And we've said this before too, but it bears repeating. You can't fail at real estate. You can just give up or succeed. Like those are the options. And as far as like fear around failing, I think the most successful people, it's tried and true. The most successful people failed. Thomas Edison, we all heard it in second or third grade. Thomas Edison created the light bulb like 1,000 different times in 1,000 different ways, and it wasn't until the 1,001st time that he actually flipped it on and there was light. I still don't know how that works, but that's the case.
Well, and his perspective on that was, I didn't fail to create a light bulb 1,000 times. I learned 1,000 ways how not to create a light bulb.
Yeah. Exactly, and it's that idea of changing the way you look at things, and the things you look at change.
Right.
And I think everyone can do that with their fear of failure. You're going to learn 100 ways not to lead generate. You're going to learn 100 scripts not to use. You're going to learn 100 ways not to present yourself at a networking event. 100 ways not to run a social media ad. And that's perfect because it's going to get you closer to success. All right, wrap up. What was the third kind of fear you said?
Fear of the unknown.
The unknown.
And I can relate to that one a little bit. This idea of the fearing failure or unknown. As you know, I'm launching, what we'll call a coaching company, for lack of a better term. And I would be lying if I said there wasn't a small piece of me that there was a piece of fear that was like, am I going to be able to hold this thing together? If I hit the benchmarks that I intend to hit, am I good enough as an individual and organized enough and on top of my game enough to deliver the promises that I've made to people? The last thing I would ever want to do is make promises and miss the target, so to speak. And so the way that I'm overcoming that is by having a more thorough plan, prioritizing all of my activities, and always under promise, over deliver. I'm not telling people to expect things that I know I can't deliver. Yeah. And so that's just something that I'm working through personally, because the last thing I want is this massive public failure. And yet, David, to your point, I would be willing to fail because I'm just going to learn a new way not to do it.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you sharing that, because it is real life. It's something that you're going through right now. And here's one other thought. I think that when someone is fearful of the unknown, I believe that you have to get really intentional of asking the question, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? Right. So fear of the unknown is something that holds people back from investing in real estate. Right. I know a lot of our listeners either have that aspiration or they do invest in real estate. And what holds them back is this fear of, well, what if the market goes down? Like, what's going to happen? I'm going to be out of all this money. What if the light bulb breaks and the tenant calls me? What am I going to do? And the reality is, like, step that back a little bit and actually say, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? All right. So, like, you acquire a property, you put 20% down on the thing, and next year the market goes down 10, 15%. What is the worst thing that's going to happen? Well, you're going to have to hold that property. You might not get the money from an appreciation perspective. Maybe you don't cash flow exactly what you expect. But at the end of the day, you're not going to die. It's not life or death. And in most cases, it's not life or death, right? There's a financial component. And that could be its own episode about taking risk and how you do things smart. So I'm not saying go be reckless, but I'm saying I think it would help a lot when you actually ask the question, what is the worst that could happen? If I go farm this neighborhood for 6 months, if I hire this assistant at a $75,000 salary, but for 90 days, what does that actually equal for an investment over 90
Right.
days? It's piecing this together and stepping it back and asking that question.
I think that's such an important point, David. And then just to build on top of that, I would say, and once you've identified that worst case scenario and you've made your decision to move forward anyway, don't continue to dwell on it.
Yeah.
Don't let your mind wander further and start filling yourself up with all these what if questions and all this negative energy. That's not going to leave any space for the good things to happen and for you to be creative, right? Don't dwell on the possibilities and waste 80 or 90% of your time consumed by these hypothetical scenarios.
Yep.
You've got to be a little bit more present and allow yourself to experience those things, make a well-informed decision, and then go.
Definitely. And that makes me think of Mel Robbins, right? Mel Robbins' 5-second rule. When you're at that point, that's when it's time to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Execute.
And just do it.
I love it.
And so I don't know what's holding you back, listener, but I think we could probably guess that it's probably one of these three things. Maybe you have a different idea. What's holding you back? I'd love to hear you reach out to us and share that with us. Maybe we'll make it an episode. Maybe we'll get you on the podcast for an episode and we can actually work through that together. I mean, I don't know. The sky's the limit.
I think that'd be a great idea. I'd love for you and I to work with somebody through something that's holding them back. I guarantee a lot of listeners throughout this episode have been applying very specific real life examples as we've been talking.
Definitely.
And what I want to challenge everybody who's listening to do right now is take the biggest, darkest fear, delay, procrastination that you thought of during this episode and go do it right now.
Right now. I love it. Guys, that's another episode of the All In Podcast. Go play All In. And while you're doing it, leave us a rating and review on iTunes.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.